in Top Gun Maverick, you're gonna see real actors in the cockpit and the full capability of the airplane when you're watching the movie.
When you get up there, you have a new respect for fighter pilots. There's nothing like it.
That's a kill.
When I first found out that we had to be in jets, I was excited.
Game time, baby!
I didn't expect anything less because it's Tom Cruise. He does all of his stunts, so I expected us to have to do it too. But when it became real, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore.
Oh, okay.
One of my favorite analogies that some of the Top Gun pilots have, it's like being strapped on to a dragon.
I told everyone, if you're going to take this role, part of it is being in that F-18. I don't know how to do it any other way.
Being in an F-18 is unreal.
There's going to be a lot of stuff that people see and go, no way they really did that. And we really did that. Tom said, I need this to happen at 30 feet above the ground. He was doing 480 knots, basically a 500-mile-an-hour race car. I've been doing this in these airplanes for a really long time, and I watch that and I go, wow, that's fantastic.
I wanted to celebrate the fighter pilot.
Watching them explore what we do, it's breathtaking.
There's nothing like it.
The Navy and the Top Gun team, oh, they were amazing.
Please welcome the real naval aviators that made all that possible. First, Commander Frank, callsign Walleye Weiser. He was Tom Cruise's F-18 Uber driver for the film. Also, joining us, the air boss for the whole program, Captain Brian Ferguson. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. This is a big night. People have seen the film and want to know how it was done. Getting the permission from the military to do all those things. Ferg, you being the air boss, who initiated who? When Paramount said we want to do a film, who'd they have to convince?
Everybody. It was a piece of cake, and it didn't take very long. Paramount came to the Navy multiple times over decades, literally. I remember in Fallon in 2012, Tom Cruise, Jerry Bruckheimer brought their airplanes out, and we're looking around and trying to site survey, and then the film got put on hold and ultimately came back with a resurgence about 3 or 4 years after we started, and it was a huge conglomeration of Department of Defense, the Department of the Navy, Paramount, investors, David Ellison at work. I mean, a million moving parts, quite literally.
But you guys keep saying the real driving force was Tom Gunn, not just as the star of the show, but the prime mover of the project. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. He was massively involved, producer. He was the, what would you call it, the driving force, for lack of a better term, but he was the creative and the instinctive urge behind the whole thing, and to make it perfect. We didn't do anything that he didn't think was perfect, which means we did everything 25 times.
Okay, every actor and every director says, I really want to make it real. He's a pilot. To what ends did he go to make it real?
What are you talking about that?
Well, I think at first he tried to fly the airplanes, of course, right?
Yeah, he asked the Navy if he could fly the $61 million aircraft.
And you would too if you were Tom Cruise. They won't say yes if you don't ask, of course, but he's also an experienced pilot, so I think anybody who flies airplanes would have at least asked. And the answer is, of course, no. We've run into this a number of different times where you have civilians controlling military assets, and it's not always to our advantage. And we're fairly risk-averse in the sense that if something did happen, in the unlikely event something happened, there's really no justification ever for having a civilian at the controls of whether it's an aircraft or a submarine or a ship, you name it. But for sure, he tried. And the F-18, for all intents and purposes, is an easy airplane to fly. It's meant to be easy. It's easy to fly, it's not easy to fight. And that's the challenge as fighter pilots, is to learn how to fight the airplane, how to employ it, both with air-to-air and air-to-ground weapons. And so we wouldn't have had enough time to teach him how to do that. And we certainly wouldn't have had enough time to teach anyone, even the single greatest pilot since the dawn of time, to do what we did with those airplanes in all the arenas, both dogfighting, carrier ops, low-level flying. We don't have a single pilot in the Navy who could have really done that all to the degree that Ferg wanted it done safely and professionally, who could cover all those bases.
So, Ferg, you had the dubious task of being the referee between the Navy and Paramount, trying to make both sides happy. It's called an air boss, but let me show you a clip here first, and then we'll talk about what an air boss does.
What the hell? Good morning, aviators. This is your captain speaking.
But now here's the real captain, Captain Brian Ferguson, Delta Airlines.
I know that guy.
So if you hear that, if you get on a plane and they say, today's mission, we're going dogfighting, he's not joking around. But so tell me about what you do now and how you got drafted back into the film.
Oh, so as you said, I'm a pilot for Delta Airlines now. At the time, I was coming out of a big job working for a two-star. My wife, Susan, was very supportive, but I think she's kind of tired of me being gone all the time with the boss. And this opportunity came up, and the three-star said, hey, I'd like you to just give them a couple months, get them on their feet, make sure nothing bad's going to happen. And I didn't really want to do it, and they kind of talked me into it, which turned out to be a great thing. It was a wonderful experience. That said, it was much longer than 4 months. Well, I just did stuff with Paramount this morning, so it's been about 5 years now in this 4-month tour. They were a little elusive about that part. And I stopped getting paid 4 years ago for that stuff. However, this scene here, for example, was fascinating. I spent a year with the guy who made a movie that, I'm going to speak for you, got us into naval aviation. I mean, we were in high school or college or whatever, 1986, and we watched this movie and went, that's it, that's what I'm doing. Which was surreal the first time I met Tom in Lemoore. And I'm wearing that. And he's wearing the Maverick, essentially the same uniform, the Top Gun patch, the captain, the 06 rank. And I said, I'm standing here dressed the same as you. Well, mine's real, by the way. Because you made a movie. I might not have said that, but the inner monologue was going. I said, because you made a movie 36 years ago that inspired an entire generation of my peers and colleagues that came and decided that we want to do this, and we did. And the funny thing is, I said that at various times in a year. I said it to him, Jerry Bruckheimer, Tom Skerritt, who was Viper, a number of people that I said, I'm here, and everybody else who's not a liar that does this for a living is here for the same reason, because of that movie. And every one of them goes, is that true? Mm-hmm. It's as if they had disbelief that what they did 30 years ago would have such an impact and a reach on so many people and generations.
Okay, now the people who saw that first film, their only reference to an air boss is that poor sap who gets the coffee spilt all over him when hot shots like Walleye make low passes at the tower, which he's been known to do a couple of times. But what is the real function of an air boss on a carrier?
Well, so there's multiple air bosses. The air boss on the carrier is the one who runs the control tower. They own the airspace out to 10 miles during the day, and they own the flight deck at night. And then it gets more complicated at night because of the way that they control the various approaches to the carrier. Then there's the air boss, which is the three-star who controls all of naval aviation. He's responsible for the bases, the 12 carriers, all the aviators. And then there was my version of the air boss, which is kind of in between, and I just made sure that we didn't wreck any airplanes or make the Navy look bad.
Well, as the air boss for the film, you quickly identified a need you had. You needed someone who could fly very, very well, very, very low, and knew something about the entertainment business.
That is true. Case in point.
That was Frank actually flying up there with the Blue Angels, and Frank is a two-time Blue Angel. So it was no surprise that the Navy's looking for its top pilots to fly in this, and first place to go probably would be the Blue Angels. But you had already retired.
Well, I was done with the Blue Angels. I hadn't retired from the military. I was still active duty. But what I had moved on to is, having finished my 5th season flying air shows, I was one of the officers in charge of moving us to this new airplane, which was the Super Hornet, because the Blue Angels had flown the Legacy, the older F-18, for, at that point, 30-plus years. And so we were in need of a newer airplane. So we had a good idea to have a couple of ex-Blue Angel pilots be in charge of this transition to this new airplane, and so that was the job I was in at the time, what was ironic to me is the fact that as the Navy's Super Hornet transition officer for the Blue Angels, the Navy didn't find it in their budget to give me the qualification to fly the Super Hornet. I was just supposed to fly the simulator to help us transition, and then the minute the movie thing happened, I was qualified the next week, as it turned out. So we can see where our priorities are. I was up to Virginia Beach for the 5 hours of flight time.
Well, he's a great pilot, but we hear you're afraid of heights, as you'll see the way he flies. This is Frank, the way he likes to fly. Ferg, is that what you needed for this film?
That's exactly what I needed for the film. And so let me back up though. When you say we went right to the Blue Angels, we absolutely didn't go right to the Blue Angels. In fact, the chief of staff who was trying to talk me into doing this, said I just want to go back to family life in the airlines, and we'd heavy lifted for a while. He goes, hey, I'll sweeten the pot. I will qualify you in the Super Hornet. You can do all the flying. And I said, how's that going to sound to a lieutenant in Lemoore, the airline guy that never flew the new Hornet, hasn't flown the old Hornet in 10 years? Anyway, horrible idea, so we didn't do that. But the point was, I said, if we're going to do it, I want to use all lieutenants to the maximum extent that I can. Because number one, they're all capable of doing it. Down to 100 feet, 500 knots, they're capable of employing the airplane to the limit of what it can do, which all went great until I sat down the first meeting with Tom, and he goes, yeah, 100 feet's not nearly low enough. I'm like, well, we're going to have a problem then. So I pitched that to the 3-star, and he said, get out of my office. We're not going below 100 feet. That's ridiculous. And I was talking to the boss of the Blue Angels at the time, and I said, hey, I need to know how we get a syllabus just to get these junior officers down to 100 feet and do some other kind of wacky stuff. And he goes, well, why? And I explained it to him, and he goes, well, what about walleye? And I go, what's a walleye? And he goes, well, walleye's the guy that's doing the super transition, and he's got more time down low than I think probably anybody in the world, right?
So if you watch one of the shows, he's one of the solo pilots that does the low pass over Crissy Field and Aquatic Park right on the water.
Right, so I went back to the air boss, and I said, I think I have an elegant solution for you, which is to use the most experienced guy on the planet down below 50 feet, really, doing this sneak passes. I've seen some that we can't show here that are lower than that and spectacular. And the air boss bought off on it. So that's where we got to walleye, who was an 05 at the time, was not my demographic. My demographic was junior officers, because we wanted a morale and a retention thing. We also wanted to strategically message, wink, wink, to, let's say, everyone who will watch the movie everywhere, that the average fleet lieutenant can do all these things. And they could have done what you did, but the safety factor that would have been added by you doing it that's how I had to get to yes, and that's how I had to sell the boss on it.
So we have a new Maverick, new Captain Pete Mitchell, also walleye. So he gets the front seat for some of these flights. But the real trick to the film was they wanted to train the actors to go up in the planes, because one of the big distinctions of this film is there's very little, if any, computer graphics in it. Those are real flight scenes, real planes flying between each other, over each other, and doing everything. And the only way they could do it was to get the actors up in the plane. And that's kind of hard to fake, right? And you can't just, it's not a walk in the park. And so we'll give you an idea of what they went through.
We are cleared into the area. Verify cameras are on. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Here comes some G's.
There's 5 Gs.
6 Gs.
7 Gs.
All right, that was awesome.
I wasn't ready to make a sequel until we had a special story worthy of a sequel, and until technology evolved so we could delve deeper into the experience of a fighter pilot.
The first movie became something that changed a generation. So this is exciting to come back and get in those jets again.
We worked with the Navy and the Top Gun school to formulate how to shoot it practically. Because if we're going to do it, we're going to fly in the F-18s.
The aviation sequences had to be real. So our actors went through 3 months of grueling training.
The Navy says if you eject, you have to be able to survive in the water. So we had to go through that challenging underwater program.
It's intense. You're flipped inverted, and you're having to try and get out.
From there, Tom designed this all-encompassing aviation training for all the actors.
I started them out in a single-engine airplane to build up their spatial awareness inside the aircraft.
Oh, wow. That's amazing! Oh, my God!
Next, we took them to the L-39, and they went and flew aerobatics to feel what it's like in a jet.
Get some speed. Wow.
From there, they'd graduate to the F-18 Super Hornet and actually launching off an aircraft carrier.
That's what I'm talking about.
The actors also had to learn how to run the cameras because when they're up in the jet, they have to direct themselves, essentially.
Okay, I'm rolling.
I had to really teach them cinematography and the lighting so that they understood what's gonna look good on camera.
Gun angle's great.
Everybody thought it would be impossible for actors to really be in the jets.
But that's the gift that Tom gave us, that by the time we got up there, we could handle it.
Definitely the most amazing thing I've ever done. All the training, 100% prepared us.
I'm very proud of what we all accomplished. Each one of them are extraordinary.
It still blows my mind that we've done this. There's nothing like it.
The real deal. And for all our aviation vets out there, like Larry Howell, who remembers the Delbert Dunker, you went through that, right, Larry? We know how horrifying that is, and that those actors were really willing to do that. Can you even tell us, did anyone say, no, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to take the part, I don't want to do that?
No, everybody did it. There was one person, I'm not going to say who it was, he was a fairly senior member of the cast that said, you know, I did this 36 years ago. I said, that's cool. You're going to do it again. And he did, and he was great.
But you see Tom, he was all in, right?
Oh, he's totally in, yeah.
All right. Meet your Uber driver. So what was your first encounter with Mr. Cruise?
We had set up a flight. I don't think I was scheduled to fly with him. He had flown with a number of the other junior officers, like Ferg was alluding to. But as I understood it, and Ferg had called me after we had filmed a lot of the scenes, and he said, you know, Tom just is desiring to fly with you having flown that low scene. And so I came out to Fallon. Yeah, I was in Fallon at the time, because we did it in a number of different spots. And he just hopped in the back seat for kind of a familiarization ride so we could go down and just fly together. But I felt like we had, as far as an aviation crew, good chemistry, and we enjoyed flying together. And then that sort of spiraled into a variety of other scenes that we filmed throughout that week and the following week.
Could you identify his flying chops right off the bat?
His flying shots?
Chops. I mean,
chops. Yeah, definitely. I mean, only because, well, so the things you notice with other pilots is situational awareness, is what your air sense is. And that's to the point of putting them through all that training that you just showed the video on, is the idea that sometimes when you get, for anyone who's ever been skydiving or been in a small airplane that they're controlling, you have this, I'd call it sensory overload, for maybe lack of a better term, or you can be overwhelmed by events. And the idea is that your brain can't comprehend the speeds you're going at or the altitudes you're at. It's not computing right, so people can just go brain dead sometimes. And it happens to new pilots when they're learning to fly. They're so overwhelmed with just making the airplane go left and right, they lose the ability to talk, as dumb as that sounds. And they'll know what they're supposed to say, that they're a beam gear, they intend to land, and they can't form the words because they're just overwhelmed. And that happens to new pilots, but it certainly can happen to an actor and there's no way they could, as they said, control the cameras or get their lines out if they're just overwhelmed. So it was a pretty ingenious plan on their end to start them in something small and work up with this air sense and this awareness. In Tom's case, he's been flying for so long, and I believe from the conversations he and I had, it was to some degree, if not totally, that first movie that sort of catapulted him into his love for aviation. But by the time we were flying together, he had flown a number of different airplanes. And we were sharing stories about the airplane that we own where we live. He had the same one when he was in Europe filming movies in the 80s and 90s, and he flew it all over Europe. It was his kind of personal taxi cab around there. And then he had moved up to different airplanes, and by the time we were filming this, he owned a Gulfstream and a Honda Jet and had a P-51, and he's just a very capable pilot. And it makes it really easy if you're flying with him because they're good. He was good in the jet. He had good awareness. Certainly when we're doing all the administrative portions of taking off, landing, coming to and from, if you're flying with a pilot, they know when to be quiet. and they understand that, hey, he's working up front, we'll talk when it's time. And so that made it really nice.
Well, it also made it easier for me that he knew enough. He didn't know the F-18. He didn't know the Navy pilot, the junior Navy pilots. But he respected that I knew. So when he would want to do some insane, crazy thing, I go, we're not going to do that. And that was it. Generally, he would, well, why? And because he's a why guy. He wants to know exactly why we can't do something or how we're going to do it. But the fact that he had the experience, because if it had just been, pick any actor of his horsepower, because he's a guy that gets to yes just because of who he is. He commands a certain amount of authority in his industry. If you pick somebody that didn't have, I think, his experience, and he's probably scared himself a few times at P-51, some things like that. If you just took somebody who had never been around airplanes, that had his level of authority in the business, and came to me and said, hey, we're going to do this. And I go, no, we're not. Which is actually how I started. And I got Jerry Bruckheimer pull me aside, and he goes, you're right, but delivery's a thing, and maybe you should. And it was fun. It was a funny, fatherly moment with the great Jerry Bruckheimer, the biggest producer in Hollywood. He puts his arm around me, delivery matters. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. So then we got along much better after that.
So now how does the Air Boss respond to Jerry Bruckheimer, the ultra producer, and Tom Cruise when they say Lawrence of Arabia shot?
That's the first thing he said on day one. He goes, I need to see the Lawrence of Arabia, the dot that turns into the camel, that turns into the guy. And I'm like, well, that wouldn't work because you'd have to be at 30 feet. And he goes, I don't think you'd have to be that high. And I went, okay. So there's a problem here. And we went back and forth on this for several months, and it was a thing.
Okay, so you told the Admiral, I got an idea here. We'll get Walleye, and he already knows how to fly real low and fast, but just to make sure, what'd they have you do, Walleye, to make sure? It sounds like a little simulator limbo you had to go through.
We did, yeah. Actually, one of the things I'm most proud about this film is how much effort went into every single scene and everything you see on camera, that it wasn't just thrown together at the last minute, that it was really briefed. And Ferg and I were preparing for that Lawrence of Arabia scene for 6 months or more before we flew it. I mean, we were talking in the late summer of 18, and I think we flew that in probably March or April. I mean, it was a long time. And so prior to that, the benefit of my job as the transition officer in the Super Hornet is I had access to the best engineers the Navy has and the best simulators the Navy has. And so I was able to go into a simulator in Pax River, Maryland, where our test base is, and he gave me the coordinate for where he thought would film it, and I flew over the exact same spot over and over again with the spring on that we'll talk about in a little bit, and with the exact lines and the right weather. We could set the density altitude. The airplane functioned exactly like it did in real life. So I could come to him and say, I know this is a high-risk photo event, but we could not have done any more to mitigate all of the risks that are out there.
So you borrowed a chapter from the Blue Angels and the spring. You got a $60 million aircraft, and you got duct tape on the stick. What's going on here?
Yeah, we do. We do some... we kind of rig these things up in a goofy manner when we take all these old F-18s. We take a lot of duct tape and we wrap it around that stick. And we take out the trigger. We're not shooting anybody at air shows, so we remove the gun from our F-18s, and we replace where the gun goes normally. We put a smoke tank in because we're trying to, motivate and inspire, not destroy. And then once the trigger's gone, it actually can rub your hand raw. You're gripping the stick so tight in close formation, so we wrap it in duct tape to give it, you have a better control on that stick. That's among other things we do in that airplane. And I don't know is this the one with the spring, or is that the next picture?
No, it's on the right side. I think. Can you point it out? Is it,
okay,
on the right side?
Gotcha. So if you see just to the left of the stick, there is a spring. And what the spring does for us in the Blue Angels, it's actually just a tiny little handle, and it pulls out of the floorboard, basically. And it is as basic as a process gets, where it's on 4 springs, just like you'd have for a chest expander if you're working out with Arnold in 1970. But it's coming out of the floorboard, and it hooks on a little bitty grommet. And what it does is it just pulls the stick forward with 40 pounds of pressure. And the reason we do it is because it gives us an incredible amount of control in the airplane when we're flying close to one another. With the idea being that the F-18 is a magnificent airplane, but it still struggles with a bit of a null zone or a dead zone, just like your car. If you're in a Lamborghini, you have control throughout the whole range of motion. If you're in a pickup truck, you could move the wheel, and it doesn't necessarily move every time you give it an input. The Hornet, the stick, you might make a tiny little movement, and the airplane doesn't move. But once you put the spring on, you don't even have to move it. You just think about it, and it moves with you. The challenge, though, is that it's really heavy, and so now you're in what amounts to about a 40-pound curl for the entire flight. And if you're sitting wrong, if you're sitting in the airplane like you'd sit in a car and your arm is out like this, it's just too hard on your skeleton, your structure, your muscles. So we would bring the rudder pedals all the way forward. And normally you'd have them, you'd put the rudder pedals, they can move forward and backward. You want them just set so that you have full range of motion with your legs, but we would bring them all the way forward so you're flying like this with your knees in your chest, because you'd rest your right arm and you have a good lever, and then you're not having to use your entire back or your bicep, you're just able to move your wrist. And it becomes more of a forearm workout. And so you fly in this goofy position, but it gives you incredible control, so much so that most of us, we insist on it. And so one of the first conversations we had about flying down low is, we have to have the spring. And that was actually one of the ways we got it, for the air boss of the Navy, the 3-star, to approve it all, was we're gonna make this identical to what I had flown in the sneak pass over San Francisco, over Miramar for all those years. If we just take out all the variables, make it the same, it's as safe as it gets. So we put that spring in there for the first time ever in a Super Hornet.
At that altitude, at that speed, a centimeter movement on the stick, what happens?
It's crazy. When you're down low, and actually the scene you have up now, the low transition, this is one that number 6 does in the air show, and you stay right over the runway at taxi height. And so you're picturing you're doing 300 to 400 miles an hour, and you have this 40-pound pull to stay level. And you could relax the stick half an ounce, and within a second, less than a second, a quarter of a second, you're in the ground. So it's a lot of physical focus, but it's also a lot of mental focus too. And so you have to, we do it a lot at higher altitudes, you slowly work your way down, but it gives you total control, but it takes a lot. You're not thinking about anything else at that moment.
And this is not a one-shot deal. This is a movie. Take 2, take 3. So you had to do this on
19.
Take 19.
And 20 on the day
20.
that he destroyed the building with me in front of it.
So here's what it looked like.
Viper 1 ready. Maverick to range control, stand by. All right, 3, 2, 1.
And meanwhile, down on the ground, here's the air balls.
That's pretty awesome. That was pretty badass. Thanks, Walleye.
Thanks, Walleye. So when I was flying, Frank, the call signs were kind of heroic, like Viking, Gunfighter. How'd you come up with Walleye?
Walleye's the most famous Viking ever. You didn't know that? I guess you need to brush up on your 800s. No, Walleye, as far as hurtful call, something very much has changed since apparently you were flying, because I don't know anyone who has a heroic call sign these days.
That's the Air Force.
If you escape with a mildly hurtful call sign, you've won. And Walleye, I thought, was actually pretty mildly hurtful in the big scheme of things. I was flying way too close to people in my first squadron for no good reason at all. I just felt like flying close, and so the joke was that I had walleye vision, and it was a joke from the movie Hot Shots, which was oddly enough a parody of Top Gun. And there was a character who couldn't see anything. He had walleye vision. He wore these thick glasses, and he had to get right up next to it to see it. And so clearly I had to have messed up vision. I had to get really close. And so it was, as far as hurtful call signs go, there's no other backstory to it. I tried to tell people I fired the last walleye in combat because we had this, we had a very cool air-to-ground munition called the walleye, but that is the gist of it. However, the Blue Angels very much appreciate close flying, so it wasn't always bad for me.
Okay. Well, later tonight up at Chesty's, General Rocco can tell you how he got his call sign of bad finger. But leave it to Hollywood to put their own take on it.
In the Navy, every single pilot each have a call sign.
Rooster, watch your back, Phoenix.
You gotta move, Coyote.
Who are your friends? Stay back. Fanboy.
What do they call you?
Bob? No, your call sign. Bob, literally.
When you hear their call sign, you're hearing a bit of their history.
Where's he going?
That's why we call him Hangman. He'll always hang you out to dry.
So it's a lot of fun. And I guess the writer probably came up with all those for the, I mean, they didn't, those
No,
actors,
they had horrible call signs like Spine Ripper and Fang and Slayer, and I'm like, we're done. Took them all up to Top Gun, and I said, there's the wall of the former Top Gun instructors. You can choose any of those names, or you can make some up, but we're not using any of those stupid, ridiculous, cool ones. So they had, every call sign was stupid. It was, you know, self-promoting, whatever. So they changed them, and they came up with ones that were, I think, a little more fitting, you know.
Okay, so it's up to Maverick front seat and Maverick back seat to do the 2-minute drill. One of the climatic scenes in the film where they have to do a low-level test run to take out a nuclear facility. And that was the whole film was building up to that point to do that. So you see, tell us, Tom's in the back seat, correct?
Here he is, yep,
He's in the back
seat,
okay. And he's all ready to fly, but yours truly in the front seat with the same helmet. But you told me that when you first got on the set, you were kind of surprised because they sent you to the makeup department. Now, you got a helmet on, you're going to wear an oxygen mask and a visor. Why'd you have to go to the makeup department?
I'll tell you, they go to incredible lengths to make it accurate. And I would have, having not been a Hollywood aficionado in the past, wouldn't have appreciated the fact that some people will do things like you've just done and zoom in on one thing to try to find any inconsistencies in the movie and what's going on. And so the first time I was flying with Tom, I walked into the hair and makeup booth, and I'm an active duty military pilot out of Pensacola who was there for a week, and I sit down, I didn't ask any questions, and I probably should have, because I felt a razor on the back of my head, and they just totally shaved the back of my head, and I go, what are you doing? I have to go to work next week, and there's no way to fix what you've just done to my head. Well, we have to fit you with this hairline. I said, okay, and next thing I know, they're spray painting my head to try to make it look right. And I hear these two, a man and a woman, talking, and they're not happy, and clearly I'm not happy. And then they glue hair to my head, and that doesn't look right. So they're cutting that, and then they're razoring someone else's hair glued to my head. And then they're spray painting that, and then they're talking amongst themselves, and I'm still in this chair an hour later. And then lo and behold, Tom's hairline shows up that they had flown up on this Honda jet, and it appeared, and it was perfect. And then they just glued that on, and it was done. And they couldn't make my neck less fat than his. That was one thing they couldn't help, but they did spray paint my neck to make it.
Are you wearing that right now?
Yeah.
Let me see. Oh, that looks good.
That's
good on you, though.
That's Tom Cruise. We'd recognize him from anywhere, right? I mean,
truly the worst part about it was not just sitting in that booth for so long before every flight. It was the fact that if you were flying twice that day, you had to keep it on all day. And so you're walking around, your head has been shaved almost up to the crown of your head, and you have this really ridiculous dark black hair glued to, and everyone knows. I felt like I was, the curtains open at school and you're naked and you're standing there and you don't know what to do, and you just feel like that all day long. It was horrible.
I'm surprised you didn't get another call sign out of that.
Yeah, no doubt.
But here it was. It was very important because this is really one of the climatic scenes in the film. And I'm going to ask Frank and Ferg to talk us through it because it is breathtaking, it is terrifying, and it is totally real.
So this is about 80 miles east of Fallon, Nevada, in an area called Toyama. And we were doing a low-level route that I had first flown with one of the other actors. They said, feel free to fly up high and get used to it. And then once we had flown up high, it was a real benefit to me before we went down low. And then Tom and I did this, I don't know, a dozen times or more. And he was comfortable with me just working it down. But by the time we got one of the runs we were both pleased with, we were really, really low.
Is he talking to you at all at this point?
No, he wasn't talking. He wanted me just to say left or right because he wanted it to look as reasonable, as legitimate as possible. So he wanted me to tell him which direction we were turning. But as you watch it, if Ferg or I were doing this low level together, especially for a low altitude ingress, we would stay wings level as long as we could. There would be no reason to be in these turns. You'd stay wings level, you wouldn't maneuver, and then you would turn at the last possible second. But we were in 6 or 7 G left and right turns constantly because it looks more dramatic for the camera. A little bit like the first movie, they're dogfighting doing aileron rolls, which is not relevant at all. You'd never do that, but it looks cool on film. And so that scene looks a lot cooler when we're in a constant turn or when we're maneuvering to the degree that we were. And so we're level low over these mountains, but we weren't level. We were just in a 10-degree right turn, 10-degree left turn constantly.
And then pulling the G's on that scene when he's got to climb out of the valley.
Yeah, we did it. We did the whole time. I mean, Tom and I, for the flights we did together, we were on what we'd call the G limiter. Whatever the airplane will give you, we were taking, and which is generally 7 to 7.5 Gs, depending on your fuel.
And at that point, did you ever look back in the mirror and see how he was doing?
No, actually, it's funny. On the Blue Angels, I could do that. I'd watch people in my rear view mirrors, but they had so many cameras back there, I could never see the actor in the back. So you only know if they're grunting or squeezing. If you hear someone get quiet, then they're taking a cat nap.
So better not to hear anything. That's remarkable. I mean, you know, a ski racer or a race car driver, they would have plotted every turn in advance. How well did you know that terrain? Did you know, hey, I got a big left coming up here, now I got a right, 2 rights? I mean, or were you just going contour flying instinctively?
No, it was really important to me that we did that right. And so when we decided that we were doing that, they got me all the coordinates, and so I'm a bit of a Google Earth nerd, and so I just went and sat in my room for the better part of 2 or 3 days, and it'll let you go down to ground level, and so I just would figure out the speed we were flying and memorize. I'll have 20 seconds. There's 1 or 2 scenes in there where you can see over the shoulder, and I think there's a scene where you can see I just have a little piece of white paper on my leg, and it basically told me, turn point 1, turn point 2, turn point 3, expect this many seconds, and so I would sit there like we would do on the Blue Angels. That's one thing where we use that sort of preparation to a great degree, where you close your eyes and you visualize the entire flight. I very much visually flew that canyon for the days leading up to the runs we did.
Let's flash back to 1986, the first film. Where were you guys? And when I was doing a story for Good Morning America, there was an anecdote going around that the Navy recruitment spiked 55% after the first film. And I called 20 people at the Pentagon, and no one would confirm that number. But they all said with a wink and a nod, there was a spike, but no one would give me the number. But for you guys, it was 100%, right?
Yeah, at least 1 or 2. It definitely affected recruiting. And then funny segue is Paramount called me. The movie released globally on May 27th. They called me in like June 2nd. I go, good, how's it going with you? And they go, no, how's it going? I go, what are you talking about? They go, how's recruiting? The movie's been out for 5 days. I don't know, call me in a year. Like, they think that we track the metrics to the day. Like, what about now? How many? It was silly that they probably do track stuff like that, but we don't. It's going to have I'm sure it's going to have a dramatic effect, because how can you watch that or the new one and not be, how can you not want to champion that and go do that? It's fascinating. It's amazing stuff. It's a sport of kings.
Where were you, Frank? High school?
No, I was 8, and I watched it right when it came out with a friend and his dad, and we went, and I remember how excited the dad was to see it. I think he was more excited than the 8-year-old kids. But yeah, what I really like about the first one, and I think we talked about this during the Good Morning America bit, was that so many of the people I've flown with, and so many of the really incredible Navy pilots that I've learned from, and more importantly to me, on some really scary nights over Afghanistan or Iraq when things weren't going well, or where we had really challenging scenarios, some of the people I flew with when I was very confident in their abilities or them being there with me had joined the Navy and flown because of Top Gun. And so that's really cool to me, that we have this movie that inspires really incredible human beings who then were great pilots, who then made everybody around them better. And so, and truly joined because of that movie. They had no intention of doing it, saw the movie, and then off they go. And then here they are 20 or 30 years later being the most highly trained, incredible aviators in really challenging situations.
This being the most difficult recruiting year in the history of the military, recruiting's way down. You were telling me even to Annapolis, 50% of people normally applying for Annapolis. The Navy sure could use a boost. All the services could get a boost. Have you heard, even anecdotally, since we never got the figures last time, do you think there's more talk, more buzz about the military, and this is going to work out for the Navy and all these service branches?
I'm confident it will, absolutely. I think people are going to go, we're going to have these young men and women who might want to be chemical engineers or doctors or whatever, and they're going to be smart, courageous, patriotic, and they're going to have some sense of adventure, but they have some course that they're on. They're going to watch this and do like with us. They're going to go, wait a minute. That's because we haven't had a movie like this in, 36 years. So there have been other, there's Iron Eagle and a bunch of kind of cartoony type aviation military movies. Flight of the Intruder was what? It was before that. I think it was 84 or something like that. So it's been a long time since we've had a movie that's about stuff like this, and B, that's so visceral and wonderfully shot, and real, all the stuff you did that we had done that was not CGI. And then frankly, there's an aspect of it that it was not an apologetic, politically correct, woke, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all the things that we're kind of getting bogged down with, where we're like, well, you can't, say this because we'll feel bad and somebody will be mad, and all these things that we walk on eggshells. This movie's about America and victory in combat. Somebody out there somewhere is going to go, America, fighter pilot, sign me up, let's go. And we were having this discussion at dinner last night. How many do we need for this to pay off for the Navy? One. We need one person, because it didn't cost us anything. They paid exorbitant amounts of money, to be exact, $13,166.15 an hour for the Super Hornet, which I thought the 15 cents was kind of funny. And the producer, I'd given these bills for tens of millions of dollars. And he goes, and it ends at 15 cents. And I'm like, Tommy, it's the Treasury. You got to pay the 15 cents. And they would. But they paid for everything because you can't have the taxpayers taking the burden because there was no guaranteed return on investment. However, if we get one young man or woman to sign up, we have actually had a 100% return on our investment, assuming they're not horrible, but I'm sure they're going to be great. But if we get one person to sign up, I think it's going to be, I think by next year, the recruiters are going to be turning people away. And funny segue, I've never seen it. I think I saw it once. Sue and I have been to all the premieres and rollouts and the private screenings. So we see it in a different venue like this, where they don't do ads and trailers and stuff. Tom does his little thing in the beginning, and they play the movie. But I'm told that in a regular theater, it starts with an Air Force commercial, and it's an Air Force F-35 thing, and I get all these phone calls. Hey, Ferg, are you mad that the Air Force is doing it? And I'm like, no, everybody should have a backup plan. So they should go watch the awesome Navy movie, and if you're in the Air Force and you're in here, this is going to hurt. But
this is the ad, the best guerrilla marketing I've seen all year long.
Oh, I actually didn't know he was going to do this.
And because the one statistic that did come up from the first film was that 33% of the audience couldn't tell the difference between a Navy pilot and an Air Force pilot. Yeah. And some Air Force guy remembered that. And so when they came up to bid for the advertising spot before the film, the Air Force jumped.
Brilliant. And it's an awesome commercial. It's really cool. Yeah. But it's going to take some people that go do that, and then, frankly, golf courses, and they don't live on ships, and they got a pretty good deal going. So, not a bad plan overall. But I think it's going to be great for all services, and I don't even mean aviators. We're going to recruit Master Chiefs. We're going to recruit submarine drivers. We're going to recruit Army tank drivers, like you name it. Back to the America Victory in Combat. People are going to watch this and go, that's whatever that thing is, that organization, that whole family. That's awesome. I want to be a part of that.
Yeah, that looks pretty good. But the real life is multiple deployments, Afghanistan, Iraq. It used to be, 4 to 6 month deployments. Now it's 8 to 12 month deployments. Frank, the average guy in the fleet now, how many deployments in his career is he likely to see if he's doing a 3-year hitch?
Oh, gosh, if you're saying staying in through 20 or 30 years?
Yeah.
I mean, on average, they're going to do 2. 8 or 9. Yeah.
8 or 9 deployments.
I mean, you're going to spend a lot of your life at sea.
Okay.
But it has gotten better. I mean, all of us look back at whoever's behind us and say, oh, they have it so easy nowadays. They have high-speed Wi-Fi on the aircraft carrier on some of them. Yeah. That's a vacation. That's not a deployment. That's garbage.
Well, it's not a vacation for the air boss, your wife Bethany, back there having to be flight controller of those kids. I mean, she's got to take over for 6, 8 months while you're gone. So it's a real burden on the family.
It is a burden, and one of the challenges on the aircraft carrier is just lack of communication, right? And so you have. Even as you get more and more senior, you have somewhat better communication, but ultimately it's email, and you could write an email, but we'd have, even as a 04 on the aircraft carrier, you'd have an hour of internet a day. So you'd send your emails, but they wouldn't go until your hour kicked in, and then you'd download everything, and so it was somewhat limited in that regard. But if anything happened on the carrier, if there's a mishap, you name it, they can, one push of a button, and it goes River City, and the whole carrier shuts down. And you could be in the middle of a conveation, and they don't hear from you for days or weeks.
Yeah, so Ferg, you came up with a nice workaround for your son's birthday there. A good way to communicate. Kind of parenting by remote.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but you guys have to improvise, right?
You have to get creative.
Yep. But, back to the point about the spouse thing. How many military spouses out here? I'm assuming the majority of the audience, right, of the... Okay, 2, anyway, 3, 4. So that's the hard part is, people join and they're young and not thinking about that, but as you go through the multiple deployments, and it's not the deployment, the 8 months at sea, it's actually, I think, the stuff leading up to it, the workups, the going to Fallon, the going to sea, the coming, the going, the packing up, that's almost harder because it's this sense of like, oh, you're leaving again, you're back, versus, hey, I'll be home in 9 months. To the military spouses and the kids, the dependents, they got an infinitely harder job. We go out and we drop bombs and it's like, you're working all the time, and you come back. And they and now Sue watched it on TV, the first, combat deployment. She's watching Fox News, and I remember she said something to me. It's Mert Fox is giving an interview in the hangar bay, and he's like, we got a strike going, we hit this big target up north, and they're coming back now, and the other guys are getting ready to go back to the same place. And I walked back behind the camera in the frame, and she was like, oh, I just saw this thing about you going, off to, on the next strike, and why am I watching this live? And I'm thinking, why did he just say that we're going back to the place that they just came from? Because, they've got TV too. So if they're watching Fox, you just told them we're coming.
Well, let's get back to the Hollywood and the glitter. So there was some good stuff here that was kind of fun. After 2.5 years of waiting, you guys can't say anything to anybody about what was going on. There comes the premieres, the world premieres all around. And I know you signed non-disclosure agreements and whatever. Was it hard kind of keeping the secret that you couldn't say,
Yeah, piece of cake.
Piece of cake, yeah. I mean, what would you tell people? Say, well, is it any good? I feel the need for speed. What are the lines or what?
I just said I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised, and that's all I can say. Is what I would tell people.
And Susan got a little benefit there. Get on the red carpet there in Hollywood. How many premieres did you go to?
I think 9 or something. Well, premieres and private screenings, total non-public things, 9 or 10, something like that. Quite a few. We know when to go get popcorn, I'll say that much.
I happened to meet Frank when we were doing the story for Good Morning America on Memorial Day weekend. And I know you did the Grumman's Theater and on the Midway and all this stuff. But I got to tell you, I think the Weiser family had the best premiere of Top Gun anywhere in the world. And this is in Clayton, Georgia, at the local drive-in. Top Gun 2, Maverick. They didn't have enough letters to get Maverick. It's just Top Gun 2.
We're not a rich town.
Okay. And not exactly IMAX. But you had your friends and your family there. And this was the night.
That's right, yep. Actually, you will be, I don't know if I told you this, the only thing our town is famous for is that the movie Deliverance was filmed there. So, if that provides any background of... And Burt Reynolds was the big star until Tom Cruise hit the big screen.
So, Frank, it's a great highlight for your family. Here you probably talk about it, but probably they got the biggest kick of seeing you in the film. Everyone saw the back of Frank's head for at least 20 minutes in the film, so everybody knows what Frank looks like, or at least the back of his head. But you got a couple of stand-ins. They wanted the real Navy guys, so they get the real Navy flyers at the bar, right?
Yeah, we had a couple spots. They threw me in there.
So people, bring us up to date on that the bar scene. It's when Tom Cruise has to pay the bill at the bar for.
Right. So we actually have a thing in the O Club for anybody that hasn't been in an O Club, and I don't know how long it's been around. A couple of years, 10 years. I kind of lose track. But so cell phones became this big. Like you talked about internet on the boat. I walked around. I was on the Roosevelt 2 years ago. Everybody's walking around with their phone. I'm like, first of all, you're going to run into something. Where's the Master Chief for the Big XO? This is stupid. But they all have, it's great to have connectivity, but the fact that everybody is doing this, and then they're doing it in the wardroom, which is where we should be socializing. So the cell phones became a big thing in the officers club, where everybody's in the club and they're doing this. So we tried the whole, if your wife calls or somebody calls, you buy around, and people were smart enough to put it on, vibrate or airplane mode or whatever. But that wasn't working. People are still on their phones. So somebody, it wasn't me, I wish it was, came up with the genius idea that if you put your phone on the bar, and somebody catches you, and you will get caught every single time, you got to buy around, and they ring the bell, as it should be, because you should be in there doing, fighter craft, combat warrior stuff, and being social, right? Not like, look at the Candy Crush thing, I'm winning. So you should be in there with your colleagues, your peers, your brothers and sisters in arms. So somebody came up with this, and we worked into the movie. We're like, hey, you got to put this thing in. And we thought it would be an aside. It became a major theme where he's doing all this stuff on his phone, and she finally rings the bell. And they have me over in the corner. They go, hey, why don't you go by and slap him on the shoulder and say, much appreciated, pal. Just to have an homage to somebody that, and the director was nice enough to throw me in there give me my $100 for the day or whatever.
So now that we have full disclosure on why wives never can reach their husbands after 6 around the O Club, I'd like to thank your wives, Susan and Bethany, for being here tonight. These guys have been gone on the road in their normal naval career. They've been doing a lot of promotions for the film, so I know it's been a lot on your families, and we really appreciate you guys sharing this night with us. And Bethany and Susan, stand. I need a little help for one sequence here. Could you stand up, please? I was looking through the film, and I knew that the Navy pilots got to do all these stand-ins in the film, and we saw, Ferg in the bar. I could recognize Ferg, and I could recognize the back of Frank's head. But in one of the biggest scenes that your husbands were standing in, I can't find him, and I hope you help me pick it out. So which one is Frank, and which one is Ferg here? Because we know they wanted to be realistic, and we know that they, want to have the real deals in there. So, Susan, can you help me out a little bit with that? Can you see?
Yes, Susan. Which one is me? Oh, I'm in trouble. Yes! I'm taller than that guy.
But let's talk a little bit about you guys beyond the piloting and stuff. You live in North Georgia, Frank. I had the pleasure of meeting you there and seeing your lovely home in the beautiful mountains near the Highlands, near North Carolina. And it's absolutely gorgeous. And I'm going to show a little bit where he lives. And now here's an ultimate flyer. The name of your street is what, Doolittle Street or?
I'm on Robin Olds Drive.
Robin Olds Drive, who's a great air ace. All the streets in his community have names of famous aviators, and you'll see why. This is beautiful, set in the mountains, and it's a fly-in community with its own airstrip. And most of the, tell me about it, Frank.
Yeah, it's a little place, perfect little spot of heaven for us. But we have a 5,200-foot runway. You can land everything from a little bitty airplane to, a Challenger corporate jet, and it's just an awesome spot. Every house looks out in the mountains, and
this is Frank pulling his plane out. I think, yeah, or did it stop? Yeah. Yep. So that's your hangar there, I think.
That's our hangar, yeah, and it's just a really awesome spot. We wanted to live in the southeast, but we're surrounded by mountains and lakes, and we can come and go as we please. That little airplane of ours can get to the Bahamas in 3 hours, and it makes it really convenient to travel around.
Now, what really struck my camera when we showed up there to meet Frank, you guys remember the opening sequences of the film when Tom Cruise is in his hangar and he's got his wrench and he's got all his memorabilia, he's got the flags, he's got his motorcycle. So if you look behind in his hangar, he's got a vintage Corvette, he's got a BMW, he's got all kinds of mountain bikes, motor scooters, tails to Blue Angels planes.
Easy.
Oh, I have to say that.
No, he doesn't. We pinky swore.
Don't you come to my house ever.
He had pieces of metal that were painted blue and yellow.
Is there a Jag in the crowd?
And
no?
a big
Good.
flag and big posters. The ultimate man cave, and just, and it struck us. We started laughing because it was just like out of the movie. Here's a guy. And Bethany, and after they got out of the military, I'm not correct, they had an apartment above there, and they lived above the hangar initially when you first mentioned it.
I did find it a tiny bit ironic that in the middle of filming this thing, I was a Navy commander, so a little bit too senior to be doing what I was doing because Ferg had lieutenants. I had declined command and basically quit the Navy, so I was not someone who was career upwardly mobile, and I was living in a hangar with my family. And I didn't quite know the storyline, but when I found out that this character that I was doubling as was living in a hangar and didn't have any career upward mobility, I'm like, man, we got a lot in common.
About you.
You're just better looking.
You're just now figuring that out?
But they do have a beautiful home up in the mountains with a 180-degree view of the Highlands, and it's absolutely extraordinary, and almost extraordinary as your family. Your kids were wonderful, and I just really enjoyed that Memorial Day weekend up there. And then, Ferg, you can't get it out of your system. You're still in the Air Boss business. I mean, you're still helping filmmakers make it look real.
Yeah, so this is actually from the first one. We were filming in Tahoe, and it was in helicopters 2 days before Christmas. So I got my Santa hat on, and we're going to go film some airplanes taking off when we mock that Tomcat taking off on the taxiway. It's actually an F5. But the joke along the movie was, it was pretty stressful, right? Because Tom is a very, he wants what he wants, and it was a high-profile thing, and if anything went wrong, it'd be a disaster. So the joke for a year was, I'll never work in this business again. They're like, right, you will. I'm like, no, I won't. So then the same guys that did Top Gun worked on Devotion, and they called me, which is a movie coming out about a great Korean War story that probably everybody's familiar with, but if you haven't, read the book before November. It's fantastic. They called me to come out because they said, we need somebody that's got care expertise for the Korean War. And I'm like, how old do you think I am? So I got him a guy who was, actually flew with all the people that were in the movie on the Leyte in this theater of operation. And what I found is you have to have a certain amount of set etiquette. You need to know when to talk, when not to talk. You need to understand budgets and timing and all these things that I learned very quickly on Top Gun. And God bless the guy, national hero and a treasure, but he couldn't pick it up quick enough. And they said, we got to bring you out here and do this. So I went to the Tillich Association. I got very smart on all these things over the course of about a week. So I learned, I was an LSO, but modern day LSO, the guys in the back of the boat that talked the jets on. So I had to learn how we did it back in the day with the suit and the paddles. And I spent a day figuring out that, so I taught the stuntmen how to do that, and this ended up being the product, was this movie.
Well, Top Gun has set a very high bar for aviation
Sure, yeah.
films now, and this one seems to match it, and you will recognize some of the lead actors from Top Gun in this film.
You shouldn't even be flying.
It's good to know the men you're flying with. See what they're fighting for.
What are you fighting for?
Hoping to find that out.
Try to keep up.
This is war. And we're up.
Can't tell you how many times people have told me to give up, quit, die even. That's why you can't always do what you're told. If I did, I wouldn't be here.
And stay tuned with Marines Memorial. We're talking with Sony, and we may have a few tickets to that film about the second week of November. So stay tuned. We're working with them and would love to do something for all our Korean War veterans who are members of the club and associated members. But guys, Berg and Frank Walleye, thank you for sharing your time with us. Thanks for getting us out of our COVID caves and back into the theater. And most importantly, thank you for your incredible service due to your incredible skills with an aircraft. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation from Marines Memorial Association and Foundation. To learn more about the organization and our programs, please visit our website at marinesmemorial.org.